Hello, everyone. Coach Carole here with you once again for, would you believe, the final day of our Personal Genealogy Network Challenge. And this is all about networking with authors of eBooks and especially genealogical mystery books. Now, I'm delighted to have in the studio with me tonight, or today in her time, Wendy Percival. Hi, Wendy. How are you?
Hi, Carole. Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here.
We're very glad that you could join us tonight. Thank you so much. Where are you from? Where are you based right now?
Well, right now I live in Devon in the southwest of England, right in the middle, literally right in the middle. If you were to draw a crisscross across this section of our peninsula where we are, I live right in the middle and beautiful little centre of a little village with lots of thatched cottages. It's very traditional, beautiful sort of location.
Beautiful.
I've lived in Devon. They don't come from Devon. I moved down in 1980 to take up a primary school post when I started teaching, and I've stayed here ever since because it's once you're here, it's very difficult to go away. But my roots, my ancestry roots, are all up in the Midlands and in Shropshire and Staffordshire and that sort of area. Although I've got a few in Suffolk as well, which I found out by surprise, as it were, as you do, by things you don't know.
Absolutely.
So,
and the name of your village where you are now?
It's called West Worlington, and it's it's lovely. It's we're in the parish of East Worlington, and West Worlington is a little bit in the middle. There's about 11 houses, and we're all part and parcel. Apparently, during the Civil War, West Worlington and East Worlington were on the opposite sides, so that's sort of fascinating. I don't know the inner details. Lots of people have mentioned that as a sort of established thing because we've got two churches. But because they all come under the parish of East Worlington, they're both used. But ours at West Worlington is a Grade 1, and it is an absolutely superb, beautiful little church. So it's a bit special.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to visit there one day. I have some of my roots are in Devon through my paternal line.
Oh, right,
and I
yes.
have been back to Taunton and Dartmouth on my travels many years ago.
Yes,
and you're right, it's a beautiful part of the country there, and you're very lucky to be there right now.
Yes. Well, I was lucky enough to sort of say, when I was looking for my first teaching post, I thought, right, if I've got to move from where I'm living, I'm going to choose somewhere that I really want to go to. So I sort of looked at all places that I knew, perhaps places I'd been on holiday and that sort of thing. And well, to cut a long story short, I ended up in Devon, and I've stayed ever since.
Wonderful. Well, that's something else we have in common, that I too was a teacher, not of primary, but secondary and then into tertiary.
Right.
But tonight, our subject matter is quite different to those that have come before in this series for the challenge. And I was very keen to invite you along to talk about how you have the writing for your series, the Esme Quentin series, and how they might have come about. Just for our listeners and viewers, Wendy is a writer of genealogical crime mystery, and I would like to know how you got started with that, please.
Well, I was already started. I'd started to write. I was starting writing, and I was doing short stories, really. But of course, you've always got in the back of your mind you'd love to write a novel. And it just happened that I had also just started to investigate family history, and you start to discover things you didn't know about, and because obviously certain things people keep secret and so on, and the whole concept of that there are secrets that people don't know about sort of started a sort of a germ of an idea in my head. And I suppose as in parallel with my early foray into family history research, this plot started to develop, and it was really based on the idea that someone comes across a secret family history element, and that became really the plot of the first of the Esme Quentin series. I didn't sort of set out really to do it as a series. Having said that, I sort of saw my character as a sort of Miss Marple of the genealogy world, really, and I set up her backstory and what had happened to her and how she ended up investigating this. And it was really because she discovered that her sister, who was attacked in the plot, is attacked in a park and left unconscious. And there's all sorts of weird and strange, what on earth was she doing there and all that sort of things. And she discovers her sister has a secret past. And in trying to get to the bottom of what's happened to her, then she obviously goes down this particular route. At that point, she is an established family historian and investigator and so on. So she knows the routes to look. And then after the book was published and people read it, they wanted to know what she was going to do next. I thought, oh, I don't know really. But by then I'd sort of, I was really into all sorts of elements of history and family history. So I sort of, every time something really grabbed my interest, I suddenly thought, there's a story in here I could create. And so, the rest of the books came along bit by bit, really.
Absolutely. And I'm delighted that they have. I have read The Legacy of Guilt, which is the prequel, I think.
That's right, yes. Well, that was interestingly written, sort of, as it were, of having written about I think it was the first three. And it was a lot of people were sort of, who've got a series, it was a sort of thing that they were starting to think, well, I wonder what had happened just before, and how did my character get to this point in the beginning of the series. So I set about to sort of go back and sort of do that, and it's the one that I have on my website that people can sign up for and download for free, because then they get a taste of who Esme Quentin is and sort of her background. And then if they like the ebook, then the prequel, then they've obviously got the other books that they can move on to. So it's really but it was quite interesting to write, because it was set quite a long few years before the first one, because the first one, obviously, we all know with genealogy research and so on, things come thick and fast, and trying to think back to the way we used to find this out and that out before we had all the internet connections and that sort of thing was a bit of a sort of head scratcher. And I consulted a lot of genealogists on Twitter and saying, how did we do this before? Because I've forgotten. And then people going, oh gosh, I can't remember. And then they'd go and look at, I think I did it like this. And so they were really useful to find that sort of thing out. So
that's great. So what year are we talking when you began the first book, and then when did the prequel come along? What year?
Well, it's a bit of a sort of stretched story. I can remember Nathan Dylan Goodwin, who writes the Morton Farrier books. He was saying that, in writing books, because of the period of time that they take to write, you do have to stretch the timeline a little bit. And, and especially with the first book, because the first book often takes a very long time to write. So this is your first one. And it was originally published under Hale, who are a hardback publisher, and they do library supplies, or did. They're no longer with us now in the changing world. And that was published in 2008. So at that point, it would have been the sort of early 2000s and so on, where I was first delving in. And so Esme's methodology is very much based in those earlier days. Obviously, as time has moved on, she's had to move on with it. But there's, as I said, there's a slight stretch in time. So if you imagine that she was, if In Blood Tide was set in 2000, and well, it was happening in the sort of early 2000s, and then this is the prequel. You can imagine I had to go back into the 90s, before to do the prequel, which is sort of before she'd become, this was her job, a day job, as it were. So that's why it was quite difficult to sort of scratch your head around things, the way that things were done back in those times.
Absolutely. And how about the name Esme and Quentin? Is there a story behind that?
I can't quite remember. I remember coming across the name and thinking, oh, I like that name, Esme. And then it might have even been the actor Caroline Quentin, who I saw his name and decided to sort of borrow that. And it just sounded quite, and I remember reading somewhere that says, whatever you do, choose the name of your character that you might be with for a long time. Make sure you like it, because you've got to live with it. And if you think, oh, I wish I hadn't have chosen that one, so you had to sort of be with it. But it's it's slightly different. It's sort of a bit quirky enough, I think, with beginning with a Q makes it a bit different. Absolutely. So it does stand out, and people do like the name Esme. It's become quite a popular name with children in the last few years, as I come across a lot of people. Oh, my granddad's called Esme, and that sort of thing. So it's quite quite a popular name.
These names come around again, and this one sort of rolls off the tongue, and it's memorable now. And as soon as anyone uses the word Esme, I immediately think of Esme.
That's good.
And you've told us a little bit about what's inspired the first. How many are there now, and how?
I've got there's 4. That's Blood Tide. That's just the first one. The second one I wrote was The Indelible Stain, and this was inspired by actually the convicts being transported to Australia. And I came across a book, which I'm sure you must know, by Robert Hughes, about the Fatal Shore. And I was absolutely mesmerized by this, because it was, and horrified as well, because some of the the conditions of the prisoners. But of course, in Devon, there were people who'd been transported to Australia. And so I was able to go and read their records in the records office of real people and get their stories, while at the same time doing all this background. I then discovered that actually my husband had an ancestor who was transported to Tasmania. So all these things came together. And so I thought, I've got to tell a story with Esme, an Esme story here, because it's just so fascinating. And so that set me up on that one. And by then, because Blood Tide, being as it started off with my inspiration from my own family history, it was set in Shropshire. But because the Indelible Stain really associated with ships and traveling and the ocean, and I thought it'd be quite nice to have Esme come down to Devon, to the Devon coast, because I have a few fantastic locations in North Devon that I know. And so I brought her down to investigate. She's actually down temporarily in the Indelible Stain, but actually ultimately she moves to the area. And so she's staying, and she does all the investigation in this fabulous location, which is called Heartland Quay. In the book, it's slightly, I've changed the name slightly to Warren Quay. There is a Warren Cliff, so it's a sort of a combination of the two names. But because it's got such a fascinating history, and a lot of the locations I use in the book, so it's one that was sort of quite inspired as much by this fabulous landscape that where it's set as anything, and lots of things happen that are associated with that location.
I love the way you say you brought her down here. It's as if she's a living, breathing human being.
Well, she is a bit when she's in your head. You sort of. Yeah. I mean, I'm writing the 5th book at the moment, and it really is just all buzzing around in my head. And I'll sort of get up from the computer and say something to my husband later. Oh, I mentioned that Esme said. Oh no, I didn't mean it. Because her name is just constantly on the tip of my tongue. So it can take over your brain a bit.
Absolutely. Yes. In your mind all the time.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm intrigued about your writing process. So do you have a study at home where you do your writing, or do you write anywhere?
I write in here. This is if I move there, you can sort of see behind me. There's a little desk here behind me with my family history pictures, a couple of them over there. That's where my laptop normally sits, and that's where I sit. And so if I'm doing starting an idea, I'm usually gripped by something has grabbed me, fascinated me, and that's what's my starting point is. And then usually I have to read loads of research and background and so on, because otherwise you just want to feed all the information in, and a lot of it you never use, but it just gives you an overall picture. And then slowly and then I sort of almost then what could have happened in the past, which could be the thing that is going to be discovered to effectively solve the mystery of whatever present crime there is. So I tend to almost write two stories, because I write the whole backstory with all the characters involved and what happens and all that sort of thing. But actually that doesn't appear in the book as it stands, because I don't write dual time books whereby, as a lot of genealogy mystery writers do, whereby you're sometimes in the head of the person back in the past and sometimes you're in the head of the present day. All mine are set in the present day, and Esme really is the conduit. She's the one that goes off to do all the research to get to the bottom of what's this happening and what the connection is with the past. And that is one of the greatest challenges, of finding something that can be relevant to today, that ties back, with credibility to an event that's happened in the past. And that is probably the hardest thing to do, so that it makes the story sort of very relevant to now, and also makes it exciting, because
that's what we want. That's what the readers are longing for. And I'm sure that many of those who are in the challenge, who have completed their diploma of family history at the University of Tasmania, will be probably flocking to your door, or your virtual door, I hope. It will inspire them to buy your book, especially the one about the convicts, because in that course, we all had to write a story about a convict.
Right, yes.
And there's a story within that I like to relay to those who will listen, that I didn't have any convicts, so I had to borrow one from a friend. And that friend was delighted that I was able to find out all that detail about his ancestor.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
So some of the people that are watching this live cast will be intrigued by your stories. And I'm sure that they will be delighted to also go and join in with writers like yourself, who are in the Genealogical Mystery Crime Club. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was as a mooted idea from, as I said, from talking to Nathan Dillon Goodman, who we've mentioned, who writes the Morton Farrier books. And he got together with a few of us, myself and Stephen Molyneux, who's written a couple of books, and Martin Lee, L.J. Lee, who writes the Jane Sinclair stories. And suggested, why didn't we set up a group for all our readers to get together and sort of swap stories and talk about books that they liked, because some of our our own readers may not be aware of the other writers and so on. And we thought, well, that was a great idea. So we set up this group, and it's been great. It's been lovely, actually, because you can go on and if anybody wants to raise a question with any of the author, they just put a post up there and people will sort of come and answer it. We've had a question and answer session on there, so that people could pose questions to the authors. We each sort of took in turn and had a session, and then there's files up there that you can access if you join the group. And anybody join, you just ask to join, and we'll let you in. And then you can go and look at all the books that are of the authors who've got involved, and somebody's done files of lists of all sorts of books in order and stuff. So if you like to be methodical, you can work your way through them. And then
that's what I did to begin with. When Nathan invited me in, I thought, I read a few of his and of Mary's and now yours, and I wanted to put them all together because I'm a methodical person. So I created a Trello board with the books in their order of being written for each of my favorite authors in that genre. So I will add that link to the bottom of this live cast, so people can go there to find out who else we might be talking about. But we do encourage you to go along to the Facebook group, and you won't remember all those numbers that are in the link there, so I'll paste it at the bottom.
And then click and away. And then you can just ask to join, and that's it.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful place to be, because I've found so many other things pop up when you're talking to readers of the books where the authors are also frequenting. So it's a great network. It's unique, I think. I've not
it is.
One like it before.
Well, it's the fact that genealogy mystery writers, or genealogy crime mystery, or however you want to call them, is really quite a great little niche, you know, and obviously family historians and who are doing their investigating, you know, it's really ideal to them. But of course, you don't have to be somebody who's following their family history to enjoy the books, because they're all sort of, you know, mysteries in their own right. But obviously, we as family historians, you sort of identify with the process often to unpick the mystery. So that's why obviously it appeals particularly to family historians.
Well, I've been so inspired. I want to now go to my local library and encourage them to bring in more. Well, they don't have any books on any of these, and I think they should, because for that very reason that you said, you don't have to be a genealogist or a family historian to enjoy them.
That's right. Yes, true.
Yes. So that's one way for us to network amongst those genealogists and readers. What about your own networking? Are there other places that you frequent?
Well, I often go on Twitter on Ancestry Hour on a Tuesday, 7 p.m. That's UK time. And there's lots of people from all over the world all network there. It's great to share the things that you've discovered. It's also great to ask questions if you've sort of, you know, hit a brick wall and you think, oh, what can I do about this? And we also share, if we've written blog posts and so on, then you post them up there and people share them and read them and comment. And I found that incredibly useful. Like I was saying to you when I was writing the sequel, the prequel, I should say, and I was sort of asking around for all sorts of, oh, well, how did this happen? But that was great, because I could just sort of post something up on the you know, on there on Ancestry Hour, and it's for an hour as it suggests, and we all sort of chat and so on. And you can always obviously go and look at on the hashtag Ancestry Hour and see what people are up to and answer and so on. So I've, you know, met quite a lot of people, and a lot of people have picked up with my books, so they're always going, when's the next one out? You know, next time you go you go on there and say what you've been doing. And so it's really
so
nice.
Twitter is a marvelous network of its own kind, and it moves so quickly. And I'm not able to attend at the time the Ancestry Hour is actually on, so I always have to go back, and sometimes I forget.
Yes,
but if
you
exactly. Yes, do hashtag Ancestry Hour, you'll find it on Twitter.
Yeah, and you'll see them when they've gone up, because they always obviously tell you sort of that was posted whatever many hours ago, so you can get the ones that have been going in and out. So that's been quite good. Also, there's the Facebook group that's one of the worldwide ones, the Ancestry and Genealogy sort of group. I think it extended its name, and I was getting confused by it. But it's basically a worldwide network, and that's brilliant. If you are trying to struggle something and it's all in writing and you can't make it out, and you just take a sort of snapshot of it and you put it up there and help, I can't make out what this word is, anybody got any suggestions, you know? And people come back within sort of seconds going, oh well, I think it says so and so. So that's absolutely brilliant as well. Really useful. So,
and that really happens quite a lot, because there's something about us in the search, being the detectives we're always up for a challenge.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I think this is the you know, the thing about, you know, genealogy mysteries, you know, and the fact that the story is almost like us investigating. It's the same sort of detective work, and so that's why probably it appeals. And I think one of the things about the books is, when you unravel the stories, is that you get the why, and you know, when you're a genealogist, you can't quite fathom out the why. You know, you have to sort of second guess it, and you have to put it in context and work it out. But obviously, as the author, I can create the why. So there's a certain satisfaction in being able to put that part of it in the story.
Oh, that is great. That'll be the quote for the evening. The genealogy mystery writer create the why for the family ancestors.
Yes, that's quite satisfying. Obviously, I contact with network with my readers as well. I have a newsletter which goes out sort of quarterly, and obviously my Facebook page, and people can get in touch with me via my website or that sort of thing. So I often have conversations with my readers about things that they've read in the book, and they ask about or they find a connection and that sort of thing, or my blog, because I write a blog.
Yes, good.
And
that next.
Well, that's another thing that is a fantastic connection. I mean, at the moment, the what is on my website, and it's I try and do it each week. when I'm writing, which I'm at the moment, it's I don't quite have the same sort of time to do the investigations, new investigations, because what you tend to find, as any blogger will tell you, when you start writing your blog, you think, hang on a minute, I don't know that bit, because you're starting to write down, and then you suddenly realize that there's a bit that you're about to write about, but you actually got something missing. So you end up going off on a tangent to try and find out what the answer is. And it takes ages and ages then to actually compose the blog. But at least, it gives you a clue as to where your directions of travel go as regards research. So at the moment, I'm in the middle of retelling one of my most shocking discoveries about my family history, which is
the title, The Shocking Scandal.
Yeah, absolutely, which I posted last week about Thomas Shelley, my 3 times great grandfather, who was dragged up in court for cruelty to his wife, but in conjunction with his housekeeper, nudge nudge, wink wink, who obviously wasn't just the housekeeper. And there was, it was quite shocking, the things that this woman called Martha was doing really to his wife. And she was obviously, it all came out in court. But what was fascinating was the fact that the community were absolutely horrified by their behavior. And when he was found not guilty, and she was fined £5, but he paid her a fine so that she didn't have to go to the correction centre, there was absolute outrage. And apparently they had to have a police protection to get from the court back home, because the crowd was so furious with the outcome, which just, I mean, I couldn't believe when I stumbled upon this, as you do, you've got Newcastle newspaper, the British newspaper archives, and you're putting in your ancestry's name and seeing whether anything comes up. And I came across that, and it opened up a whole amazing set of stories, which, as I said, I'm just sort of, actually little bits of it I've since added a bit more to it since I first found it out, but again, until I get the opportunity really to explore read it.
So, and now I understand its title, The Bite-Sized Blog.
Yes, right. Yes.
Now.
Yes, yeah. Well, originally it was going to be quite sort of little snippets when it started out, but as is with these things, once you sort of get going, you suddenly realise that it starts to gather pace. It ends up being sort of longer, because you can't quite tell it all. It's all over in a flash if you just had one little bit. But then obviously, like I said, you go off and I must find this out, and I can't write it without saying what happened here. So, but it's a great way as bloggers say, as family historian bloggers. No, it's a great way of recording things you find, sharing them, and
one of my blog posts was just like that, where I didn't have all the facts for the first one, so I was hedging my bets and only talking about the top half, from that year to that year, which I knew, and then said I'll be back later with more. So continued the whole saga.
Yes.
And that kind of worked well, because it drew people in, knowing that there were. It was a set of next bit that I'd imagined the sisters writing to each other. So I came back with a second episode of The Mary Letters Part 2. And blog writing is what I do mostly. I've not written whole novels like you. I aspire to. I've done one that is all about my ancestors in Devon, from Devon. And that's just a little ebook that I put together from some of the information that I've found too on the old British newspapers. So it's amazing what you can find there.
It is, yes. And then, of course, it gives you enough information then to go and sort of search in different directions, because there's clues within the reports often, and that
that's
sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And just finally, I would like to pick your brain a little bit about the way in which you've decided to publish your books.
Right.
Would you like to go down that trail with us?
Yes. Well, as I said to you initially, when Blood Tide first came out, it was published by Hale. And I think in Australia there was a couple of, because they were library suppliers, there was a few Blood Tides hardbacks in the library service in various parts of Australia. But by the time I'd come to the second book, the whole world of books and eBooks was just starting to blossom, and I thought this is really where things are going to go. But it's all very well having written it on your laptop or whatever, but actually how to get it out there is obviously quite a bit of a learning curve. So the first thing I did, I was actually engaged a company called Silverwood Books, who are based in Bristol, to do all the technical side of it for me, but which they did a great job. And so it became in paperback and in ebook, and they did all the work to that. But obviously the ultimate aim was to actually work out how to do it for oneself. And so they sort of supported me through that era, and then they've done a lot of authors who've then gone on to work out how to do it themselves. And I also joined Ally, which is the Alliance of Independent Authors, and they have a Facebook group, and any questions that you've got about doing things, it's fine. It's a great opportunity to sort of pick other people's brains. But ultimately there's so much about now with regard to how to do books yourself. There's a great software system called Scrivener. I don't know whether you may have heard of
that one. Yes.
And that is obviously, you can use that to create your ebooks. It will do it for you. You obviously learn how the process. I absolutely love Scrivener. I sort of, it's just brilliant for me, because I'm always, as you're writing, you're constantly thinking about, I mustn't forget about this, or I must check this and I must check that. And because it's set up in such a way that you have little sort of notes almost next to what you're writing, so you can jot them down of that particular thing. I absolutely love it. And then you can go through their whole system and it will make it into an ebook. And then you can then set yourself up on mine are now published through Kindle, which is Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, and you just create your account and you upload your books, and as long as they're of sufficient sort of quality of presentation and so on, and technology is fine, and obviously you go with covers and all that sort of thing, then they're off your way. I always, as all independent authors will stress, it's important to be vigilant as far as your editing goes, to make sure you get external editors. You don't just, because you can't, no matter how good you edit. I mean, I edit my books down to sort of, within an inch of their life before I pass it to my editor, and she even then will sort of, pick up this and pick up that. And but it is, and then proofreading, and then you have to a cover that is of good quality, that doesn't look amateurish, and so you may have to pay for those services, but that is, then it becomes a credible book for people to read. And if you're starting out, you can get different levels of editing. You can get editing to support you and learning the whole process, and you can get editing who's just doing it to make sure that you haven't made him have blue eyes in one page and brown eyes in another, and all that sort of stuff. But but as I said, the Alliance of Independent Authors is very, very good, because they are really there for and you can learn all the skills. They've got fabulous blog posts about all the processes, and you really are not, you've got someone to hold your hand as you do things. And there are also people who will create your file for you and make it into an ebook if you want to do that, and you don't want to do the DIY bit, but essentially you're in control, and that's the thing. And then you decide when you're going to write something, how long it's going to take. You're not there on a treadmill, and also obviously it's you are sort of the number one decision maker about what you're writing. So that's great.
Excellent. Well, that's very very good information. I've just found that link, and I'm just going to pop it up there for the Alliance. That is.
That's it.
That's the one. Okay.
Yes.
And I just wanted to mention that I don't use Scrivener. I have it, but I use a different piece, which is Dabble Writer. It doesn't have the same bells and whistles for publishing, but it might get there. But I do all my writing in that particular one. I have friends who swear by Scrivener as being the best tool. And certainly I've learned the hard way how to create an ebook using the information from Amazon on their KDP.
Yes, that's right.
Self-publishing. And it's an interesting path to go through. I think, as an exercise, as a piece of learning, it was well worth doing.
Yes.
Well, we've been chatting away here for over half an hour, Wendy, and we've covered a lot of ground. And I just wanted to find out if there is anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners today.
Well, I think, as you say, I think we've been through all sorts of things, haven't we? And
Yeah.
I've just
Maybe the names of the other books, perhaps?
yeah, I will show you those. So I've got obviously I had Blood Tide was the first one. Indelible
Yeah.
Stain was the one I mentioned about,
Yeah.
based on the Australian comics. The third one, I should say, was The Malice of Angels. That's about SOEs in World War II, the secret agents, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading about. That was absolutely fascinating. And that one's The Fear of Ravens. Now, there's a place in Bideford in North Devon near where Esme lives, and it has the dubious history of being the home of the last 3 women to be executed for witchcraft in 1682, and so that was the inspiration for that, and so that's quite interesting. And there's also, which is what Silverwood Books published under their books scheme, which was the little short books, and called Death of a Cuckoo, which features Esme. Esme's the expert that the protagonist engages to research her mystery. So you see Esme, it's slightly different. You see Esme through somebody else's eyes, which is quite interesting. But that's just, as I say, as a novella. It's a short read.
Right.
So the one I'm writing at the moment is underway, but at that point where you just really are flying through treacle a little bit, but I'm getting there. It's always a long process. So haven't got a title for that yet.
No, that comes later. I understand.
Certainly does. Yeah.
Put your author place on the ticker tape again. So if you'd like to find out how to get hold of and read a little bit more about the books from Wendy, you can find her on www.wendypercival.co.uk. So a big thank you to you for giving up your morning for us in the PGN Challenge. And I hope you've enjoyed your first time in StreamYard.
Yes, I have indeed. Thank you very much.
And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. And we do encourage everyone in the challenge to try and touch base with Wendy in the challenge in Facebook, as well as in the Genealogical Mystery Crime Club in Facebook. So have a look for all of that. Thank you so much, Wendy. It's been delightful to listen.
Thank you, Carole. Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
Excellent. I'm very pleased. All right, I'll now end the broadcast.